Mankind likes to believe that there are no monsters, that we have always ruled the world. It is not so. Robert forgot his phone again. Sandy viewed the offending device with amusement. The phone, a battered-looking Samsung with a cracked screen, sat on the kitchen table cheerfully blaring a Spice Girls song. Robert liked listening to music when they had breakfast. It was an even guess whether or not he'd remember to turn it off and put the phone in his pocket before going to work. Today he hadn't. Sandy was a fit woman of 28 years. She had the lean physique of a runner, which she was, and the haunted eyes of one who helped people through their traumas, which she did. Sandy wasn't sure therapy had been a good career choice. It was surprisingly stressful. Most of her fellow therapists ended up hiring therapists of their own. Still, it was important work, and Sandy took some small satisfaction when one of her clients actually started getting better. Sandy's hair was blonde, shoulder length, and perpetually frizzy. Her eyes were blue. Robert said they were like the ocean, deep and beautiful and sure to drown a man. But really they were just blue. Sandy considered herself pretty average in the looks department, even if her husband disagreed. Sandy chuckled as she wandered into the kitchen. She closed the music app, one hand still running a towel over her hair. Sandy still had an hour before she had to leave. Plenty of time for Robert to notice his mistake and come back. If he didn't, she'd just run the phone out to him on her way to work. Either way, she was guaranteed to get a kiss, a quick snuggle, and sweet nothings whispered in French. Robert was not French, not remotely, nor did he speak that beautiful language of love. That didn't stop him from trying. Sandy loved that dork of a man. Speaking of dorks, she heard the front door open. The brisk clomp of booted feet was coming toward the kitchen. Sandy didn't know how Robert managed to make clomping noises on the living room carpet, but he always did. She smiled, adjusting her floral bathrobe in anticipation of her hubby. "It's on the table, sweetie," Sandy called. A man entered. Robert was an ordinary-looking man with dark hair and a trimmed beard. He was 5'8", barely an inch taller than Sandy. His eyes were brown and sparkled with humor. Robert wore blue jeans and a black t-shirt. His usual goofy grin was missing. He regarded Sandy with a serious expression. Sandy frowned. "Robert?" She stepped closer to the man. "Is something wrong?" A fist crashed into Sandy's cheek. She fell back, face numb from the impact. She found herself on the floor, staring up at the man in shock. Robert had hit her. Robert had hit her? He would never. Robert stared down at Sandy for a moment. His eyes lit up. A slow, feral grin oozed its way across the man's face. This was not the easygoing smile of the man she loved. It was something else, something cruel and dark. Robert stepped towards her. Sandy scrabbled back. "Robert!" she cried. "What are you doing?" The man stalked forward. Sandy scooted around the kitchen table as she tried to get back on her feet. Robert could have caught her, but he waited, watching her stand before he came to her again. Sandy dodged the haymaker, ducking away from him. "Robert!" she shouted. "Robert! What?" An impact cut her off. The punch had taken her in the sternum. Sandy let out a strangled cough as the air whooshed out of her lungs. She folded in over herself. Her legs gave out. Sandy found herself on the floor again, staring up at Robert's wide, manic eyes. It wasn't Robert. It couldn't be. Robert had never hurt her. He never even yelled. The man was a teddy bear. This wasn't her husband. It looked like him. It moved like him, but it wasn't. Sandy couldn't imagine what had gotten into the man. She was not a superstitious person, but her first instinct is that her husband was possessed, or maybe a shapeshifter or something. It was ridiculous, of course. More likely, Robert had been drugged, or he was having a psychotic break, a manic episode, dissociative identity disorder. Sandy didn't know. Whatever it was, one thing was sure. Robert was going to hurt her badly, maybe kill her if he could. A steel-toed boot caught Sandy in the back, right in the kidney. The pain caused her to spasm involuntarily. She tried to cry out, but she couldn't. Her lungs weren't working yet. She couldn't get any air. Sandy curled up into a ball, trying to protect herself from the flurry of kicks she was about to endure. The kicks didn't come. Instead, a strong hand seized her by the hair. Pain. God, it hurt. Robert dragged her by the hair, sliding her across the hardwood floor of the kitchen. She still couldn't scream, but Sandy clutched at the man's wrist, trying to take some pressure off her scalp. She felt this transition into carpet as she was dragged into the living room. The living room was not a large space. Their apartment was more cozy than big. Sandy and Robert both made decent money, but housing was expensive. Still, they kept it clean, and the furniture was both stylish and comfortable. Robert dragged Sandy across the plush gray carpet. He let go a moment later. Sandy flopped to the floor, still trying to breathe. Robert watched her, still wearing that manic grin. Was he drooling? He was. Spittle flowed down the corner of his chin. Sandy had seen a lot of people show a lot of different emotions as a therapist. She had never seen anything like the look in Robert's eyes. Hate and glee and rage and delight all twisted together into something inhuman, something horrible. That look alone would have sent her fleeing in terror, if only she could move. Robert watched until Sandy was finally able to draw in a breath. 2 quick gasps. She tried to pull more air in on the 3rd breath. She was going to scream. The walls in the apartments were thin. If she screamed, someone would hear. Maybe. She hoped. Robert reached down. Strong hands closed over Sandy's throat. Her scream came out as a gurgle. Robert leaned closer. Wild eyes bored into Sandy's. Sandy grabbed his wrists, then his hands. She clutched and pried, tearing frantically at him, desperate to get those hands off her throat, to open the airway so she could breathe. It was useless. He was stronger than her. So much stronger. Sandy's pulse pounded in her ears. Her lungs burned. Her face throbbed. She felt tears leaking and spittle flying out as she coughed and choked. Some of it hit Robert's face. He didn't seem to care. If anything, his smile widened. He leaned closer still. His nostrils flared like he was smelling her terror, savoring her inability to scream. Sandy kicked him in the balls. The grin didn't fade, but Robert's hand spasmed. She kicked him again, and a 3rd time. Now Robert hunched a little, his insane smile replaced by a shocked grimace. His grip slackened enough that Sandy could finally pry his hands off her throat. She kicked him a 4th time and scooted back, coughing again as sweet air found its way into her lungs. Terror and adrenaline gave Sandy the strength to get up again. She tried to run. Robert caught her arm. He was still hurt, but the rage in his eyes had come roaring back in. Sandy lashed out. She aimed for the throat. Her fist smashed into Robert's neck with all the strength she could muster. It knocked him back a step. He clutched at his throat, coughing. Sandy didn't bother hitting him again. She didn't consider herself weak, but she didn't have a prayer of beating Robert in a fist fight. She'd taken a few self-defense classes here and there, and the one piece of advice she'd retained was that she should always try to get away. Sandy ran. Her first instinct was to run past Robert and out the door, get out of the apartment, and keep running until she got away. There were 2 problems with that. First, Robert could run faster than she could. He'd catch her before she got out of the building. Maybe someone would show up and help, but she couldn't count on it. Even if she did make it to the parking lot, Sandy was in her bathrobe. She didn't have her car keys or her money or her phone. She wouldn't make it far, and she couldn't call for help. The second problem was more immediate. Robert was only a few feet from the front door. She'd have to stay in grabbing range long enough to open it. A couple seconds at least. It wasn't a risk she was willing to take. Sandy ran in the opposite direction, to the bedroom. The bedroom door had a lock. Sandy locked it. The bedroom door wasn't that sturdy. It wouldn't take Robert long to batter it down. She just had to hope it took him long enough. Once the door was locked, Sandy wasted almost 2 whole seconds deciding what to do. Her cell phone was on the dresser. She could call 911. She might even manage to give her location before Robert battered the door down. Would that be enough? Calling the police would have been more than enough to scare off the old Robert, but the old Robert would never have hurt her in the way this one had. The police wouldn't get there in time to save her. Alternatively, Sandy could try to get out the window. It wasn't a good plan, but it was possible. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. The bricks of the building wouldn't make good handholds, but she could dangle herself out the window as low as she could. The drop probably wouldn't kill her. No. At best, a fall like that would break her legs. She'd be helpless, and there was no reason Robert couldn't follow her down. Again, there was a chance someone would show up to stop him, but Sandy wasn't going to bet her life on it. That left one option. Sandy ran for the closet. Robert had bought a handgun a year ago. He claimed it was for home defense, but Sandy knew he just thought it was a cool thing to have. She'd gone to the gun safety course with him, and they'd gone to the range a couple of times to shoot, but after the novelty worn off, the thing had just sat there on a shelf in the closet gathering dust. Sandy hoped it still worked. Sandy had never considered shooting a person before, let alone her husband. Robert was her world, or he had been. Sandy couldn't begin to guess what had happened, but that man, the thing in the living room, was not her husband. She wasn't even sure he was human anymore. The thunk of boot on wood sent a fresh thrill of terror shooting up Sandy's legs. She knocked a couple of shoe boxes off the top shelf, finding a black case that housed the pistol. It was locked, but the key dangled from a chain attached to the case. Sandy's fingers shook as she tried to get the key in the hole. Thunk, thunk, crunch. The door splintered, falling into the bedroom. Sandy finally managed to get the case open. She pulled out the pistol, whirling to point it at the monster stalking in. Half a second later, she realized the gun wasn't loaded. The little bullet clip thing was still in the case. Robert rushed her. Sandy held the gun in front of her like a talisman as she reached back for the magazine. Her fingers closed on it at the same time Robert reached her. He grabbed the gun and ripped it out of Sandy's hands. He tossed it on the bed. Sandy screamed, trying to punch him. Her fist collided with his chin. Robert barely noticed. His open palm slammed into her jaw like a freight train. Sandy sprawled, half falling into the closet. Robert stepped over her legs, reaching for her again. There was a sound, a door opening, a voice. Robert's voice? "Ma petite? I forgot the phone again." A pause. What the hell? A wild hope surged out from Sandy's chest. The thing attacking her wasn't Robert after all. Even better, Robert was here. Maybe he could stop it. Sandy started to yell for her husband, but the fake Robert's hands closed off her airway again. She kept trying, smacking her hands and feet against the walls, trying to make a noise. Booted feet clomped towards the bedroom. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Sandy looked past the fake Robert. She saw the real one staring at the man's back with a confused expression. It took him a moment to realize what he was seeing. Then his eyes widened. "Sandy!" the real Robert cried. He charged the fake one. The fake Robert let go of Sandy. He met real Robert's rush with one of his own. They struck at the same time. A fist crashed into each of their jaws. They swung again in perfect sync, hitting each other with identical furious expressions. Then they grabbed each other by the shirts. Sandy watched in fascinated horror for a moment. It was like watching a man fight his reflection in a mirror. The two of them shoved and punched and flailed furiously, neither able to gain an advantage. It wouldn't last, she was sure. The real Robert might be a perfect physical match for the fake, but he wasn't a killer. Fake Robert was. It was only a matter of time before that difference made itself known. Sandy could help. If she ganged up on her husband with the fake, no. Sandy was already hurt. The Roberts might be able to shrug off each other's punches, but Sandy wouldn't. Couldn't. Worse, the real Robert would try to protect her. It was an opening the imposter could capitalize on. Jumping in would get her husband killed. Besides, Sandy didn't want to fight the fake Robert. She wanted to kill it. Sandy noticed the clip? Magazine? Didn't matter. The thing that holds the bullets was still in her hand. Fake Robert was busy fighting the real deal. Sandy crawled out of the closet. She made for the bed, narrowly avoiding getting stepped on by the men fighting above her. She made it to the bed. She climbed to her feet. The gun was right there. Sandy picked it up. Her hands were shaking a little. It took a few tries to get the bullet holder into the pistol. She gripped the back of the top of the gun and pulled. The top slid back, then forward, putting a bullet in the chamber. Sandy found the safety and carefully clicked it. She raised the gun. One problem. Sandy had been forced to stop watching the Roberts in order to get the gun working. They'd been moving around. She didn't know which one was the real one anymore. Both of the men had red marks on their faces. Neither was bleeding. Their shirts were stretched and torn in exactly the same way. They made the same grunting noise as they strained against each other. The Robert on the left noticed her and the gun. "Shoot us both!" he shouted. The Robert on the right turned back. His eyes widened. The Robert on the left shouted again. "Shoot us both!" Sandy shot the Robert on the right. The gun was loud, so loud. The Robert on the right didn't jerk with the impact, not like in the movies. He just froze, staring in shock. The other Robert shoved away from him, diving into the closet out of the line of fire. Sandy shot the imposter again, and again. A terrible primal rage tore its way through her body, mixing with panic that was already there. She screamed her fury as she emptied the gun into the man. Sandy wasn't a good shot. Fake Robert was only a few feet away, and some of the bullets still missed. Some, but not all. The gun clicked empty. The top part racked back again, showing an empty bullet chamber. Sandy pulled the trigger a few more times anyway, still screaming. She only stopped when the imposter's legs gave out. The Robert on the right slumped to the floor, back propped slightly against the wall. He coughed, staring at Sandy with a confused expression. He spoke 2 words. Sandy's ears were ringing, but she could just barely make them out. He said, "Ma petite?" Shot Robert coughed again. Then he wheezed 3 more breaths. The breathing stopped. His head drooped. His eyes turned glassy. Sandy lowered the gun. Her chest was so tight. She couldn't get enough air. She was taking great gulping gasps, but it wasn't enough. Her face hurt and her throat was throbbing. She was shaking, and the shaking wouldn't stop. Dimly, she heard a whimpering noise. It was coming from her. It was over. She'd killed it. The bastard, the thing that had come into her home, beat her, terrified her, and tried to kill her, all while wearing her husband's face. It was dead now. It was dead, and she'd killed it. Wait. The man she shot. What had he said? Ma petite? Ma petite. Oh, God. The chill swept through Sandy. The chill so violent her whole body twitched. The thing had never spoken. That didn't mean it couldn't. What if she'd been wrong? What if the thing had tricked her? The other Robert came out of the closet. He looked down at the dead man, watched him for a moment, gave a slow, satisfied nod. Then he turned to face Sandy. He smiled. Sandy tightened her grip on the empty gun.